Okay, the adventure continues. So this weekend I was able to pick up a power bulge hood from 1971 Dodge Charger, which is what we're going to use to make sure we got enough clearance for the supercharger on this car. Obviously the front edge is going to have to be modified somewhat, but that's where we're going to start. Curiously, AMD decided to reproduce these, and we were hoping to get a new one, but they are out of stock. They said they couldn't provide an ETA because they do not have a work order to even do another run of these hoods, so it could be a year before we see another reproduction power bulge hood. At any rate, the first job I have to do this morning is very glamorous, and that's to start rebuilding these hinges. The pin kits came in this weekend, and of course, you know, I'm over here hanging these doors, and I'm overcorrecting to make up for the slop in these hinges, which just a little bit of slop like that will make the door drop maybe a half of an inch. So I'm going to tighten these hinges up, take these pins out, drill this section out, put some bushings in it. Also, in the same process, what I'm doing is I'm widening these rear holes. Now, these rear holes have threads that bolt the hinges from the inside of the car and one from the outside of the car. The problem with that is that once the two cars are spliced together, you wouldn't have any way of accessing these holes and mounting your doors. So I have to swap these around so that all three bolts are mounted from the outside and also have enough clearance in these holes so that I have some adjustment. So these are drilled out a little bit wider. Here's a door bolt. Let me give you an example. So I've got a little bit of slop there, so that if I have to do any final adjustment on that, of course that one's always big. Either way, I decided to stop what I'm doing right now and go through the hinges and get them tightened up, so there's no just to eliminate one more variable of the adjustment that I'm doing on the doors right now to try and get the quarters on here correctly. So rebuilding these lower hinges is a little bit more of a challenge, because where you normally would just put one bushing in, take up the slack, I ended up having to put a double set of bushings in, and what I needed to do was I needed to clearance exactly between these two pieces, because this upper piece of steel was, you know, kind of wallered out to where when you put the pin in and the bushings in, it didn't tighten the hinge up. So I had I had a second set of these brass bushings, and I put them in facing each other so that it would tighten both of these holes up. And the top one had to be trimmed down because it would have been sticking proud of this area right here, but that's good and tight now. So anyway, just thought I'd show you that. Anyway, these are the bushings I'm talking about right here. All right, anybody familiar with my last build and these old V bodies will notice that the hinges are bolted to the car, one through the outside right here, and then usually two from the inside into the hinge, which the hinge is threaded. Well, that won't be accessible once this body is dropped over the Challenger. It's no longer going to be an access point here and here. So what I usually do is I will weld in a threaded nut, in this case threaded T-nuts, that correspond with these bolts over here, the thread pattern, and so that all three holes can be bolted from the outside. I usually wait until I've got the doors really as close to a perfect alignment as I can get them, and make sure that I have the hinge, oversized hole drilled through where the threads are in the hinge, so I have plenty of clearance, and then I try to center these nuts up. What I'll do is there's a piece of threaded rod, and I run it through so that the nut, and so that I can hold it in place. I'll run it all the way through, have it sticking out, so that I can center it up in the hole, kind of feel where it's at, and then weld around there. Anyway, so that's the way that I have to prep that up to make sure that I don't forget to do that. Otherwise, it's it's a no-go on bolting the hinges to the car. I just wanted to show you the options. This is what I used. I had some of these left over from when I worked at Hendrix. I don't even know where they're sourced from. Basically, it's a sheet metal, stamped sheet metal threaded insert. They're nice because you just have to weld across these two flanges. It's got a nice long neck on it, so it's got plenty of thread. This is the other common option, would be to take a flange nut like this, and so you've got a nice surface to weld around here for those hinges. Anyway, I think you might be able to get these at McMaster Car out of Atlanta. Alright, that was a bit of a wrestling match trying to get that put on there. Pretty heavy, especially for an old guy. Anyway, I hung the door in the same fashion so that I could get the glass fit up to where it was just bumping over there. A little more resistance over here with this rubber gasket than on the other side, but other than that, that's just the fact that it's a brand new gasket. Over time it'll crush, but I'm not even going to use that gasket, to tell you the truth. Anyway, that's just to position everything in its stock location. Got the hinges all repinned, all rebushed. Got them all bolted in properly so that any kind of tightening on the hinges, usually you have to have all the bolts in for the most part. Otherwise, it'll move in and out depending on how you tighten these hinges. So, got to get them all tightened down to make sure that all your adjustments are correct. You don't have any sag in the door. That's where the pins and the bushings come into play. And I pushed it back as far as I could, as far as the quarter panel, to try and, now that I have I started out with a 5/16 spacer on the jamb itself. This overlaps, so now that I have a 1/4 inch, and hopefully we won't get too much buildup with the primer and the paint, and we should end up with hopefully a 3/16 opening there, and it's straight along the bottom. Everything rolls in really nicely. Right now it's just all screwed on there. Make sure my quarter panels, while they may not be, to whatever the specification is, they're both equal height over here from this bar on the bottom, and the Dutchman panel is in, basically screwed in also. The only real issue I had, if I was actually doing this to stock, is this quarter panel here. The window bed's not stamped deep enough, so this would have to have been cut along here and then pushed down a little further over here to maintain this being level. Not that bad though. But as it is, once the window plug goes in order for the headliner to wrap around into the window plug, a lot of this will be cut out over here once the window plug is in, and once we have the height of the package tray. What we're going to do here, because the Challenger package tray is a lot higher, we want to keep it. We want to keep the rear seats and everything, which on the last build, we had to drop everything down, including we have to cut 3 inches out of the rear seats to drop them down, keep the headrests from popping up through the back window, this tunnel back window. Well, this is going to be a fastback here, so there's plenty of room for all of that stuff. So the package tray will be up right about level with the plug as far as where the end of the glass is here. It worked out fine on my car where I didn't have to use any of the structure here. I used all of the structure that was on the Challenger, so that'll be up about, like I said, about this high, and the seats will just be in their stock. It's a little bit of a hassle because they have to be cut into the C-pillar, so it's a little bit more of a pain to get everything to where you're not cutting out too much metal, and when you drop it, all of that stuff will go into this pocket over here that actually doesn't exist right now. But on the stock Daytonas, what they did was, when they put the headliners in, they just basically came around here and then they wrapped straight in here. It's kind of an awkward looking deal. But what we're going to do is we're going to try and make it as if this was designed like I did with my car, from the factory to come around gently and into the rear window that's going to be elevated here. Anyway, that's enough of that drivel dravel. I've got to place a few more things before I feel free to get this thing welded on. Had a few little minor adjustments here. Once I pinned these hinges, I thought I'd taken up all the slack, but once I tightened everything down, this door raised up quite a bit, so I had to readjust the hinges in the front once they were pinned, get this all decked out back to where it's supposed to be. Anyway, we'll continue on from here. Okay, so the all-important corners of the quarters are tacked on, and the roll pan, the lower part of the back panel here, back fascia, is just kind of screwed in and tacked in. Just making sure that everything, like I said, is squared up before I commit to anything as far as welding everything up for sure. So we just got done, have this assembly over here that came with the car, and recovering the trunk gutters out of this off of this assembly. And you can see that right there, that's the one of the 3 places that the VIN number is on this body. This is would be underneath the rubber seal for the trunk. And this piece fits right up in there, creates the trunk gutter. Anyway, so that's part of the original car, and it has the VIN number stamped in it. Anyways, on to the next thing. Okay, so if I was doing a restoration instead of what I'm doing, I'd be a little bit upset right now, because this is a really nice joint on either side of this Dutchman panel, but the gap at the front of the deck lid is probably what the old stock gap looked like. That's pretty big to my way of thinking. Anyway, it relates to here pretty well as far as the length is concerned on both sides. And the deck lid's laying flat. It's not twisted or anything in the bed. The problem is there's 0 gap on either side. I mean, this is dead tight here. There's really no gap along the side here. So you go from almost 3/8 of an inch at the top over there to this situation here. Now I know there's some caps on here, but they're only about 1/2 an inch. So if I pull it forward a little bit, it does gap slightly, but that makes the gap at the front obviously pretty massive. So on the last build, I actually had to pack that out to make that tighter, make it more reasonable looking when the car was done. But I'm gonna have to take that Dutchman panel, which is just clamped in there, and I'm gonna have to put some kind of a spacer to get these quarter panels to widen out just a little bit, so I have some breathing room on either side here, because obviously this can't go like this, and there's no spreading it out at this point unless I release those 2 points. Anyway, my sympathies to anybody who's trying to work these things in, doing a restoration. It looks like there's a lot of work that has to be done to these panels in order to get them to breathe a little bit. But once again, I'll say it, at least we have them. There's plenty of people restoring cars that have no replacement parts. Anyway, moving on to the next thing. And I'm going to give them benefit of the doubt and say that probably on the stock car that this gap is probably wider. It's probably about what I've got here now. I've got like 1/8 of an inch gap right here. So that seems to bring this seam in nicely and gives me about 1/8 of an inch all the way down. There is a little bit of a deviation. It has to be corrected here. It gets a little tight right from here to here. But this gap looks pretty decent now too. And again, I have another 1/8 of an inch spacer in here, so I'm going to assume that that's the amount of gap that they probably had in the stock piece, and just through the fact that these dies are old and they're worn and everything, that maybe this panel's just a little narrower than it possibly was when it was first put out. But anyway, that wasn't too bad. I'll just put a temporary spreader on here to hold these quarter panels apart so that I can maintain this spacing. All right, so this is where we're at with this. Got the quarter panels welded on now. Welded on the tail, the roll pan in the corners, the lower corners. Got a spreader over here to make sure it maintains the width. As I'm working my way around, I recovered the original rain gutter for the trunk or lid, and both sides, and media blasted them both, primed them up with weld-through primer, and then welded them in. It's welded to the plenum now. Since these won't be seen underneath the window plug when that's finally in, I went ahead and just top welded this seam over here to stabilize it, and across the top here I welded it to the window bed that would normally be used for the recessed window there. Anyway, we've got the door lock pillars all welded in now, plug welded through here. Now this will be cut and moved out eventually, but this is making all of this structure solid so it's in the right position. Had to replace some metal down here and over here, cut that all out, replaced it. More metal over here had to be replaced. There was a little rusted metal in here, so I cut that all out, replaced that. We had a little bit of metal that was missing in the front over here on this door pillar, the hinge pillar. Took care of that. Same thing over here as far as welding everything up to the quarter panel. Got the lock pillar all welded in all the way down there. It's also the bottom of the quarter on both sides is welded right here at this seam. And I've left all this loose because it's just going to get cut away anyway. So no need to weld that all up. And we're welded at sail panels now on both sides, so it's getting pretty solid at this point. The next step is going to be to connect the dots right here. Normally you'd put the tail light panel in, but I'm going to put a custom tail light panel in here, and the bumper arrangement will be custom also. This will be the Hellcat tail lights will be fit in here. I'm just going to be using this tail panel as a guide. It's a pretty crispy critter. It's had a rough life. Looks like it's been repaired a couple of times here. A piece of sheet metal in here, but you know, some patchwork here. If I had to, I would use this. It's definitely solid enough. It looks kind of bad. It's got some surface rust, but it would clean up okay. These things are basically unobtainable at this point. They're out of stock. AMD hasn't had them in stock, as far as I know, for almost a year now. The replacement pieces. I saw a new old stock piece on eBay the other day for $3,000. So with that in mind, I wouldn't be tossing something like this away, even though it looks a little rustic. But I'll be using this as a pattern to first establish. This finishes out my trunk bed as far as where the deck lid drops down onto and where the seals go. So I'm going to be reproducing this in just some new sheet metal. That'll be my starter for the custom panel that'll be on the other side. But in the meantime, it'll just finish out this this rain gutter bed right here from side to side and get that in there. And that's where we are with this. It's starting to look like a car. Okay, what I've done here first to try and get this going is I split this into two sections so that I could easily bend it in the brake, because obviously it goes in a V shape to follow the back of the deck lid. So I measured my upstand here, which is 7/8 of an inch, and instead of just putting a small rim on the back side here, I've added about a 1-inch rim on the back side. And the reason for that is on my last build and the build before that, I had to add a flange to the back side here to accept the panels that finish out the interior of the trunk. So this gives me an opportunity to actually have it built in. So it's cut at a slight angle, basically bisected this angle here in order to get this V shape, so it'll be welded together in the center right there. But before I do that, I have to make one more bend, so I've measured this from here to here. And also what I've done is I've taken a simple carpenter's angle finder, and I use this to get my back angle here to see what that's pitched at. Now I only have a 1 inch, I'm only going to have a 1 inch down turn right here, but I just need something to keep this thing rigid so it doesn't flex up and down, and then I'll be adding the custom panel from that 1 inch down. But to get started, I'm just going to have a 1 inch flange right across the face here. So I'm going to fit this up together, and then I'll have to trim out these pieces here. This is where it fits in to the little rain gutter on either side. Make that cut out, and I'll see what we have. But before I actually finish it out and weld it up for complete, I'm going to turn the deck lid upside down and double check that this is exactly where it needs to be. Another aspect I forgot to tell you about that you have to be careful with this is this goes downhill on both sides from the center. So it has a slight house top in it right here. You can see by the fact that this is slightly gapped. So I had to trim off a little bit here of the two pieces we're wanting to overlap, a little bit of interference, and I'll also just line it up sitting on top of this and tack it into place to try and hold that angle right there. And anyway, that's where I'm at with that. Alright, so I just got the cross piece just tied in with a couple clamps right now, just to make sure everything looks pretty good, and it does. The gap and everything is pretty decent there. Just a minor amount of tweaking on this side, just a little bit, but not much. So I've got the deck lid on top, checking for clearances and everything else, but also at the same time I went ahead and I have basically made a pattern off of my own car as far as the deck lid is concerned. The deck lid has to be shortened. See, it may seem like this is getting way out ahead of the situation, but it's actually not. Reason being is I have to shorten the deck lid, make all the modifications I'm going to make, mount the hinges, then I have to close this area up here with sheet metal, finish out the bed relative to the shorter deck lid here, and then mount the hinges and possibly even the latch if I get that far, with this where I'm able to crawl under the car here very easily and sit on the ground and work very comfortably, rather than to lay underneath the in the trunk, which is pretty cramped once you get this thing mended to the other car. So I'll do all of that work. That'll be hard to get to with the body off the car. That's a little more convenient, that's all. Also, in looking at the deck lid, there's a difference in the Daytona and Charger 500s in the sense that they have a sweep that goes around here that accommodates the plug. You'll notice that the line is in the opposite direction, which means most guys will take a 1971 Dodge Charger reproduction rain gutter for the to finish this out right here, and then bring the plug down into it, or if it's a plug that has the rain gutter built into it, if it's a manufactured plug. Anyway, I've made my own in the past, so that's what I'm going to do here also. I haven't even checked to see if a 71 rain gutter is even available. Lately my trips to AMD have been fruitless, so at any rate, it has to be curved in this direction as opposed to this direction here to accommodate this deck lid and the plug. So I have to get this all closed in and make that the rest of that rain gutter for the underneath the trunk lid, and then I'll move on from there. Okay, rather than trusting my sketching, I went ahead and bent up a piece of L channel here so that it arcs over in this direction, and then it also takes up the pattern for where the cut line has to go. That way I could make sure I could tweak it to, get any irregularities out of it and get a nice clean line to scribe this on. And I taped it to here and put a scratch line in here, and I added 1/2 of an inch. This is my actual cut line out here because this flange will be used to roll under this front lip. So basically that's what that looks like. Thought I'd show you what the top of the bed looks like also in the rear here. This deck bed, I still have to weld it in there. You see the drill holes for the spot welds, but that's what it ended up looking like. Here's that extra length in the front so that I have something to attach my trunk interior panels to instead of just this tiny little lip here. Anyway, moving along. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've trimmed this off to the pattern plus 1/2 of an inch. I've taken the forward section here, peeled back this fold over on the rim, and I've taken pulled this inner liner out, and then I've taken the plasma cutter and I've trimmed out this forward section. Now, this is not the way you would do it if you're making an actual replica of a Daytona, obviously. There's a piece that they have that they stamped out that fits in here nicely and finishes out the front edge. Obviously, this is the wrong curve. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to shrink and stretch this on both of these rims, this rim and this rim, try to get this thing to comply with this curve over here. Then it'll have to be split in the middle because obviously it's not wide enough. It came from a narrower part of the deck lid, the original deck lid. What I'm trying to get is this surface right here is what seals up on the trunk seal right here, this angled surface right here. So I want to basically take this and mend this in and also give me the proper spacing at the front edge over here for my beds to engage. So there'll be a lot of cutting this in once I get this shaped up right, and then split in the middle so I could spread it out and get it to fit the ends. Clear as mud. All right, so I just thought I'd show you what I'm up to. Well, I've got 2 pieces like this cut out, and I ended up only using probably this much of the corner, very small piece on this side. As you can see, I cut it out till this surface was swaled around here, and this surface over here had a nice transition to it. I left it long for a while to make sure the alignment was good as far as it coming around the curve. Then I took this piece and I basically changed the radius of it so that it was curved in this direction here. So I basically shrunk this edge up a little bit, and then I stretched this edge out just very gently across there. It didn't take much to move it. I didn't want to do too much because if you do too much, it'll change this arc in this direction here, which keeps the crown of the deck lid in its proper shape. So I just very gently nudged it here, and then a little bit more over here, then there and there, until I had this roughly a 1/2 inch away from my cut line here. And then this will fold over and capture this once this is in place. Also, I just nibbled away, taking out just a little bit at a time, and worked this all forward. I didn't want to cut too much out because then it's just that much more that I have to hassle with and put back. This will have to be cut, of course, at an angle over here. The hinges will fit up inside this little tunnel here, but that's another job. I just have to establish this perimeter first, and that's where I'm at. All right, the next piece I have to kind of emulate is this piece here. It has a pretty tall profile, and it keeps the front of the deck lid, arced up so it doesn't flatten out on you over time. So what I've done here is I took a piece of 035 and I bent it in this shape right here, and so it has a vertical wall. It's kind of at an angle. Both of these vertical walls allow me to shape it with a shrinker stretcher, put a kind of a crown in it so that I match the deck lid itself as far as that's concerned, and now I'll be able to tack this to this surface here, which this is the surface that goes against the rubber sealer. So it'll tie into this tower over here. It'll go up and around this tower here, and then over the center tower over here. And that's about it. Nothing special. It's just adding a little vertical strength to this over here, because this is not a very tall profile. All right, so that's one side pretty much done. I'm not going to try and solid weld this because it will probably distort this all, so just got it tacked. I'll put some panel adhesive in these inner corners here. It's an epoxy, and we'll seal this all up, and that'll be good. Anyway, this piece here, normally you can see, this is the hinge, bolts in from the side, but since we abbreviated this so far, what we're going to have to do here is we're going to have to run them in here and bolt them in through the top, because you can see back here where they normally bolt, it flattens out, and you can see this thing here curves away, so there's no flat surface to through bolt them. So we'll just come up with some bolting here. What I'll do is I'll drill these out and put some T-nuts on the back side, threaded T-nuts, and we'll put some oversized holes here in case we have to adjust it in or out. And once it's in the exact spot, we'll finish this closure out around this tight and put these in there permanently. Anyway, that's enough puzzling for this week. Again, I thank everybody for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.